So what are the concerns? So let's address the concerns. The concerns first were that the president made a deal regarding the missile attacks that are continuing on Israel, but he made a deal for them not to hit maritime shipping or American ships in the Red Sea. So Israel being left out, that is not a comfortable position. Israel would have loved to, maybe the president put maybe more pressure. Maybe the Yemenis, they made a conclusion, would not stop that until there's an action, the kinetic action ends in Gaza.
To me, at least, that's one of the most concerning things, is that he announced the ceasefire, and we weren't expecting it here in Israel. He announced it on, I think, May 6th, only 2 days after the Houthis had successfully launched a missile that hit the inner perimeter of Ben Gurion. And as you and I are speaking, the Houthis have launched now, 6 more missiles? And I, at least, am not aware of anything that Trump has said about these attacks that have come since he announced the ceasefire. Is there a message there? Is he?
Well, that's the question. On one hand, people will spin this to a certain degree.
Right.
They might say the president may not have said anything about this, but he didn't tell the Israelis not to respond.
True.
And so Israel's responded, and the Houthis have held to their part of the deal against the United States. I don't think it was our finest hour doing that. But the question is, will all the anti-missile systems that block ballistic missiles from the United States, from the Gulf countries, the ships are around from other allies there, are they going to still work when ballistic missiles are headed for Israel? So far, everything has worked. We shall see what goes on. By the way, it wasn't just the Israelis who were left out. The Brits, who were directly confronting Yemen with us, had no clue that a deal was made. So, that's a little bit of a truly America First mentality that doesn't really think about the allies until it's maybe a little too late, which I do have some problems with. But there's a lot to say on that. So the second thing that people thought might be daylight was regarding Al-Shara, who used to be Al-Jalani. He was the former ISIS and Al-Qaeda,
right?
Who's now a jihadist in a suit, maybe?
Yeah.
Very
and a nice haircut and trim beard.
Trim beard, very pragmatic.
Right.
And so he is reaching out. He has big hugs from Macron. The MBS in Saudi Arabia convinced President Trump to have him come there and have photos taken. And I can tell you, when I go to Congress, it's not just the president who wanted sanctions relieved on Al-Shara. And personally himself, there was many millions of dollars bounty on him. But on Syria, it was Democrats and Republicans. They wanted it. And I said to Democrats and Republicans, so I can't blame this totally on President Trump, although President Trump had the power to do it in withdrawing it. I said, this is where I agreed with the Israelis, before you stop the sanctions, let's get some reciprocity, tangible reciprocity. So, for example, let's make sure that the minorities in Syria are not going to be attacked by him. Or from my point, which would be the Kurds or the Druze.
Right.
So maybe to have gotten something written that there's some kind of armistice with Israel, as opposed to giving him the sanctions relief and then hoping that he will be appeased. And I think he's made some gestures towards the Israelis, I think, to placate the Americans. One was returning personal effects of Eli Cohen, the famous spy. Yeah. These are lovely gestures, and I think he's beginning it. But I think we needed more before we did that. But I can tell you, whether we're talking about the House of Representatives, both the Democratic and Republican heads of the Foreign Relations Committee wanted sanctions relief. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that was another daylight place. So I'm trying to give you nuance here.
Right.
Clear. Yeah. Next, we'll go to Gaza. So this is where they thought there might be some daylight, because the president's hostage representative, people think of Steve Witkoff as the special envoy. There was somebody named Adam Bowler.
Yes.
And Adam Bowler was talking behind supposedly the Israelis' backs and was not informed in doing hostage negotiations. And the administration basically said, no, that's not happening. And then Adam Bowler was kind of pushed aside. Now Adam Bowler is back, and he's again dealing, direct talks, as is Steve Witkoff. through an intermediary in Oman, using the Qataris also. And so the idea that Israel in this war, which is a war that Hamas started, that these terrorists will remain there, has been kind of pushed aside. So that's what people kind of see some daylight. The president, and again, as he's for American interest, is saying, Khan, I want this war over with. I want to sweep this under the rug.
Yeah.
But yet he has allowed Israel, unlike in the previous administration, he increased the munitions that Israel got from the beginning. But he's getting a little impatient with what's going on here because Hamas won't take a partial deal. Israel accepted the Wickham partial deal, but the Hamas is very smart. Yes. They want a end deal where they can remain around, maybe behind the scenes, and wait to come back.
Yeah.
This part of the world, it's about strategic patience. They got it, our adversaries. We don't. And so that was it. And then we'll get to the last one of daylight, is basically the negotiations on Iran.
Right.
And, Israel's not a direct party or an indirect party here, although there's supposedly communication. But we saw an option come out this week where 3.6, where the deal may be, and again, this is, we'll say, I don't know, but this is what I heard, that there will be a freeze of Iranian enrichment for 3 years and then allow them to enrich to civilian levels. Now, remember, giving the world's leading state sponsor of terror the right to enrich, which is what the Obama administration did, was insane, and also got nothing for it. Yep. So the question is, will the administration to have a deal feeling, I'm worried. So what would be the maximum, going back to the maximum leverage? It would be to strike Iran now. Then you negotiate. That's when you get them to dismantle their nuclear. That's when you get them to stop the other pathway through plutonium. That's when you get some control on ballistic missiles. That's when you're able to ask or demand better that they don't support their proxies again with any sanctions relief. If the Iranians turn this down, then, maybe we can end in a regional war. And that's the last thing I want. I want to be known as a anti-war, pro-peace president who gets a Nobel Prize at the end of this. So the Iranians are great master negotiators. They're playing us. I have to see, we saw it, having them ran around John Kerry and Wendy Sherman and and President Obama in those days, because they was desperate for a deal. But what I would tell my government, what I would like to tell President Trump is, you have leverage and you're acting kind of like you don't. What's your leverage? Israel sustained the two largest ballistic/cruise missile attacks, UAVs, and survived, and with great American help, including ally help, even Gulf help.
Yes.
And then Israel in October was able to destroy the defense system that could knock Israeli planes down. The Iranians are acting strong, but I think they're really vulnerable.
Right.
And if the president really wasn't sure that was good enough and makes them scared enough, besides sanctions, trying to put their currency, the rial, down the drain, which would hopefully bring up the Iranian people against them. By the way, that is the ultimate way to make the world better, is to get rid of the Iranian regime. And I'll just digress there for a second.
Yeah.
I tell the administration, I tell anybody who listens to me, I want you to be pro-Iranian. That's pro-Iranian.
Yes. Yes.
And that means because they are going to be with us exponentially more than this regime.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this regime is about, what do they chant? Death to America.
Right.
Putting the death to Israel aside, death to America is front and center.
Yes.
So that's one of the things that we should be doing here. So what would be the maximum, going back to the maximum leverage? It would be to strike Iran now. Then you negotiate. That's when you get them to dismantle their nuclear. That's when you get them to stop the other pathway through plutonium. That's when you get some control on ballistic missiles. That's when you're able to ask or demand better that they don't support their proxies again with any sanctions relief. None of that, by the way, ballistic missiles, sanctions relief, human rights, or whatever, or these other things are part of any of the negotiations now. And I faulted the Obama administration that, but Secretary of State Rubio, who's secondarily doing this, Witkoff is doing primary, has already said this is only about nuclear. I think that's a mistake.
Well, as you and I speak, we're very much aware of an article that has been splashing all over the headlines here and even elsewhere throughout the world, put out by CNN, that Israel is on the verge of an attack against Iran's nuclear program. Do you see it as imminent as it is made to sound?
No, I think Israel has been preparing for a nuclear strike for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
Okay. So
we've heard this. When I came here in 2012, toward the end of the year, everyone thought that we were about to attack Iran then, and all throughout the years, this has cropped up. And so, for me at least, to hear this now is a bit like, okay, I've heard this before. Is it really as imminent as they're making it sound? It's a bit hard to believe that it is.
Are the Israelis preparing to strike? Absolutely.
Yeah.
No doubt. Are they capable of striking? Yes. Are they capable of striking as well as my country? No. Okay. That I feel confident of telling you. All right.
Right.
Now, think about this. If, let's just say the Israelis really feel they can make a huge difference in attacking, and even without America, would Prime Minister Netanyahu convince his security cabinet to attack while President Trump is negotiating? Or if President Trump negotiates, and let's just say it's a bad nuclear deal, JCPOA 2.0,
right?
Would the Israelis attack something that was going to be considered a great achievement? The president is not going to be happy.
No.
There's going to be some type of retaliation. So what are the Iranians doing? They are going to drag out negotiations as long as possible, because the longer they draw them out, they believe Israel will not strike, because Israel worries about antagonizing the president in not giving diplomacy its full course. Now, there is a countdown going on here.
If you're not yet a subscriber to endtimes.com and would like to see the rest of this important report and others like it, I urge you to subscribe right now at the website, endtimes.com. For only $7 a month, you will receive a wealth of information and insight from Jimmy Evans, Mark Hitchcock, and experts from around the world, including Israelis living right here in the Jewish state. Do yourself a favor. Sign up today.